All right, action. All right, cool. Hey everyone, my name is Rachelle Gordon. I'm the editor of Greenstate.com, a cannabis lifestyle and news publication owned by Hearst newspapers. And this panel is all about controlling your narrative and your brand messaging in public, which is something that obviously I know a lot about, but so do my colleagues here, Jason and Robin. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So, Jason?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Paredes. I am the director for CannStudio, which again is part of Hearst newspapers. So what I always like to say is Greenstate is your publication, your media on that side, or the business side on there. So how we complement each other is all the marketing and advertising services that you guys are looking for because you love reading Greenstate or coming to Greenstate, getting your news. We're that side that can take your brand and elevate it and are backed by Hearst, right, which is the largest media company in the world. And so that's who I am. I've been in the industry since 2015, marketing and advertising brands globally.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Stroike. I'm the executive director for CannStudio. And while CannStudio is relatively new, we've just started about a year and a half ago or so. I've been with Hearst for 30 years in the advertising space. So lots of good experience on the national side, as well as brand as well. So.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, guys. It's really good to be here with you. For those of you who are operators or brands, it's all about getting your voice and your brand out there and getting that recognition, right? But how exactly do you do that, especially with all of the restrictions that we have as cannabis brands? We don't have the same opportunities that mainstream businesses have, and it can be really frustrating, whether it's not being able to advertise, whether it's getting shadow banned or shut down on social media. I think we've all been there, right? It's a drag. But fortunately, all of us on stage have the tools to be able to kind of break through that mold and get your brand or your business in front of the people who really need to see it to give you an ROI, right? And so for me, on the press side, we're elevating through earned media and a little bit through paid media. And the difference is that obviously, paid is paid. It's like more sponsored content, but there are opportunities for journalism within that through advertorials. And then you get in front of the journalists to be able to get that earned media, that free organic media that everybody wants so desperately. But there's lots of other ways to get in front of consumers or your general audience as well. And so, Jason, for brands, especially ones that are new or on a budget, which most of us are in cannabis, what are some of the most effective strategies or tools that you would recommend for people?
Yeah, so again, I want to kind of, follow through with something that you said there, right? The limitations, that are there, the compliance things that, we all struggle with, especially if we're operating in multiple states, right? Something that you do in Michigan will look completely different in Illinois. Here in Massachusetts might look completely different to the emerging markets, around you, Connecticut, New York, Jersey, et cetera on that. So, let's get out of the way the things that you absolutely can't do on that, which is like pay-per-click with Google, right? Which if any new business is there, that's one of the leading products that people like to do because it's very end of funnel, right? I'm immediate, in need of this, so I'm searching for it. Oh, here's a paid ad that lets me skip the line and show my product or show my company there. So what I tell people is yeah, that's great to be, pay-per-click. We've seen that kind of fall off though in traditional advertising for retail CPG on there because it's so competitive now. So what makes it smarter, which is something that's affordable to all of you guys, is SEO. And I know SEO is this huge elephant, right, that can go in all these different places. So what I really recommend brands to do, especially when they're starting out, is listings, right? Making sure that we know Google My Business, we know maybe Weed Maps, Leafly, the industry specific ones, but what I see every day is that there's probably 60 to 70 listings state by state that your business comes up on that you're not aware of on there, that you're not going and owning those listings. You're not making sure your website information's correct, your hours of operations are correct, your address. So when these search engines go and search for you, that's where they're pulling a lot of their information from. And if your information's not correct there, like that's gonna hurt you and how you organically pop up. So that's something like very cheap, very affordable to get started on that will catapult you. I promise you, when people are looking at like Google Maps or Waze or Apple Maps to get to your like dispensary location, if you're a dispensary, like that's a big deal. If you're a brand, right, it's how you build that, you know, very easily start to build like, hey, I do flour, or I'm processing, you know, for edibles. So that's something that I would tell you is really turnkey and something that you should own. The other thing that's opening up more and more every day is programmatic on there. So like when I started in 2015, there were limited publisher networks that would come on. Like Hearst, we were one of the first publisher networks to get in there. You're talking lower CPMs and things like that when you look at it from that side. But like now, depending on who your partner is, your vendor, like what we strive to do at Hearst was like be in the back end. Right, so we have relationships with every major point of sale company because we want to show you the math, right? We want to show you like, hey, not only do we drive traffic to your store location or your website, but this is how many transactions we aided in, right? We're not going to take the full, like we know it's a funnel, it's a marketing mix, but like here's how we can show you that we were part of incorporating that mix. And now more and more networks, you know, mainstream networks have jumped on the bandwagon. Like it's not uncommon now. You could read major publications like Sports Illustrated, like USA Today, GQ, and see cannabis advertisements there, up there. And again, like that's something that's very effective that you can trace back to point of sale. And then that's even expanding into things like online radio. Spotify's come to the party. Apple and Amazon radio have come to the party, at least through us. Television, we're tied with MLB TV, NBA TV, Amazon with Freevee, you know, Tubu TV, all of these channels. So it's really starting to open up. So if it's been a minute since you've looked at programmatic, I'd highly recommend you look at it and understand too, you're gonna need data. And so whoever you partner with, like make sure they've got access to third-party data, or they have a really wealth of first-party data, or that you guys have enough first-party data to be built up.
Yeah, and that to me is really mind-blowing. Like I sat in on a few meetings with the team looking at their capabilities, and it was not something I'd really thought about before, you know, how much data there is out there about your potential consumers and the amount of information. You know, if you're looking for a kind of curious soccer mom who's looking for something for sleep, you can target that woman. If you want to target someone who's headier, like a high-end consumer looking for these expensive rosin products, you can target that specific person in a specific location. The ads will show up wherever they are. It's really, really fascinating. It's a little bit creepy, but also just like really interesting because that's how marketing is done. And the fact that, you know, Hearst has such a wide swath as far as like the data goes and the reach, it was just like mind-boggling. So Robin, you've been in this business for a long time, as you mentioned. I know one night we were joking about how advertising used to be, you know, you'd put an ad in one of our newspapers or the yellow pages and hope it sticks. You know, now we have all of this technology. And entering the cannabis space specifically, what are some of the trends that you're seeing sticking out for cannabis operators, and what's been really, really compelling for them as far as the digital marketing side goes?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, content marketing, native advertising is something that's working very well because people want to know your story. It's kind of like a tribe mentality, so they want to know who you are and what you do and how you do it. So, and also it's a sneaky way of, with all the legislation and with all the what is it called? The compliance laws that we have from state to state and how they're different. You can't really show flower, you can't show product, but within a content piece, you can. So it's kind of a sneaky way to be able to advertise things that you can't advertise just on a display ad. So we really like the content piece. And before anything, to Rachelle's point, before you start any sort of campaign, whether it be content, just a traditional display, programmatic, whatever, the audience and who you're trying to target is so important, and that's like where you got to start everything, because if you're not hitting the right person, nothing you do is going to work. So, and by the way, you want to have multiple campaigns going. You don't want to hit me the same way that you're going to hit Jason. You know, I'm a grandma and whatever. I want to see something very different than what he's going to want to see. So you have to have multiple pieces of content, multiple pieces of display imagery and that sort of thing to make sure you're hitting the right audience with the right message. But so yeah, programmatic content, to Jason's point, lots of different avenues within the programmatic space, CTV, OTT, there's lots of different ways to hit that audience. And then of course, making sure that you're hitting the geography that you want to hit as well. So lots of different things like that. We even email newsletters are really popular right now, and I don't mean like to your own audience. I mean, we can pull audiences for you so you're attracting a new customer, a net new customer, not just your same database. Those work really well. What else, Jason? Those are like three real big ones, but.
I think the important thing, guys, is understanding that it's a new ball game. There's a lot of platforms that maybe you didn't realize you could be on, and it's like, how do we connect the dots on there, right? Like, we brought up, you know, the shadow banning and that with social media, right? Which is still going on, unfortunately. But like, we worked a lot with like X, you know, formerly Twitter, to figure that out. We're doing the same thing with Meta. And like, again, why I love content is we're probably the only agency that I know of that can do, with no like tricks, you know, with landing pages or that, do fully compliant Meta and social media ads on other platforms outside of X. And it's because, again, it goes with the content, because at the end of the day, we're not promoting the use or the sale, we're promoting the education and the story that you guys are telling on that. So some really interesting ways, but it's about connecting the dots, right? Like, and again, working within your scalable budget on that to see like how many things we can do and being able to do omni-channel.
What's the budget? So the budget, it's a really interesting question, because I think there's a misconception about, oh, you have to have, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to make a successful campaign, and that's just not the case. To Jason's point earlier, just the SEO stuff, you can start that for $500 a month. I mean, it's not expensive. We do a lot of programmatic campaigns for $1,500, $2,000 a month, and what's interesting about that is you start there, and with the right audience, with the right messaging, we're having clients that are tripling, quadrupling their budget from month to month because the ROI is there. So in other words, it's a net neutral, because they're, you know, maybe paying $2,000 for a campaign. Well, they're selling $6,000 or $8,000 worth of products, so that's a good deal. I give you $1, you know, you give me $1, I'm going to give you $8 back. That's important. So it doesn't have to. You start out small and then you build upon that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really liked what you said earlier about making sure that you cast a wide net, right? Because there's different audiences. You know, Greenstate is a different audience than Beard Bros or, you know, MG Retailer. And I've actually had people pitch me stories and even wanted to do sponsored content, but the content wasn't right for Greenstate. And I said, maybe you should take it to one of these other publications, because we just want people, I think we all agree, whether you work with us or not, we want you to succeed. We want the industry to succeed. That's why we're really here, because we want to elevate this thing to the next level and get people what they need, get in front of folks who are still curious about this space. It's really important. That's definitely my motivation for sure. I know that you guys have been working a lot on the East Coast, specifically like in New York, you know, you're up here in Mass. So are there anything that's like standing out on the East Coast with the cannabis marketing versus like other markets that you work with?
Yeah, so again, I think education here, right? If we look at it, I always go back and I say, if you look at the West Coast, you know, California, they started the industry. They're the pioneers on that. And then we saw it come to the Midwest, right? Come into markets like Michigan, Illinois. And I mean, just look at Chicago, right? It's the cannabis capital for corporate weed, right? Like when we think about who's there. So business best practices came out of that. The East Coast, I really feel like you guys have making it an industry on that. You're seeing what has worked on the West Coast and in the Midwest, and you're applying that and shaping that here for the East Coast. And so, and this market, they want to be educated. Like this is probably the least educated market, because the grows and things like that, like you think about a market like New York, right? Sour diesel, right? We all thought, and I can't think of the gentleman's name that was the pioneer, Adrian, right? Who was a pioneer for that. everybody thought he was like off the face of the planet, right? And then came back, legalized, and now he's back, and sour diesel's a big deal. But again, it's not the same deal where we had like the Emerald Triangle out on the West Coast, and like there was this culture around it on there. So again, I think it starts with education, and that's why, again, we push a lot of content because everybody's got a unique story. I spend so much time trying to explain to everybody the concept of using what's come before, not just in cannabis, but other markets. Like I do the story of fast food, right? So the number one brand for fast food revenue-wise for years and years was McDonald's. Today, it's Chick-fil-A, and they're not even open on Sundays, right? Like, so that's amazing that they've gotten that foothold on that, and they've had it for several years. Did you guys notice what happened about several years ago with like the billboards and advertising in the fast food world? It all became about chicken nuggets and chicken sandwiches, right? Because everybody thought the reason why Chick-fil-A was winning was because they made a better chicken sandwich, or that's what the consumer market wanted. They didn't think about like, oh, the experience of what I get when I go into Chick-fil-A, it's always clean. It's always like, you know, the customer service aspect. They come around, refill my drink for me. I don't have to pay 50 cents per sauce. Right? Like, so again, you know, stay in your lane, like, and worry about what you can control within your four walls versus worrying about what the guy across the street's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that authenticity piece is so important, as we all know in cannabis, right? Like, we have to be ourselves. We have to actually think about who we are as a brand and telling your brand story. I think that's also crucial too. And I think it's a mistake that a lot of people make trying to be like everybody else. It's like, find your voice, you know, and amplify it, because that will resonate with our community, right? They want to see that. And I think that's where I think a lot of the, you know, the bigger MSOs have struggled, right, to really find that voice. What are some of the other like more common mistakes, especially that cannabis brands make when it comes to marketing when they're starting out? What'd you guys say?
Yeah, I'll hand this over to Robin here in just a sec, but I think this really segues well. So one thing that I would say is period on the last question was people need to understand before they consume, right? Like, we know we have a top of funnel problem in this industry, and it's because largely, I'm not saying anybody in this room, but how many of you guys have seen the ads, buy 2 pre-rolls, get 1 for a penny, right? Like, there's nothing there to make a net new customer understand what your unique selling point is, key selling point on that. And so that's also part of your narrative, like that's a falling point, is that we think that, oh, we're gonna attract, we build it, everybody's gonna come, right? And they know about the industry. So remember, they have to understand before they consume.
I think a common mistake that people make too in their marketing and advertising is not really having like a point person that's going to look at the back end analytics as the campaign is progressing. So you might have one person that's looking at your GA and another person that's checking your social, but what happens if one of those people leaves and then no one knows how to monitor your social? So I think having one really strong point person within your own organization to be monitoring your back-end analytics is super important. And I think a lot of people aren't doing that. And then even more importantly is having a partner that will look at it with you or that will provide that service for you so that you can understand what's working really well. And even more importantly, and Jason always makes fun of me because I always say this, but I think it's even more important to understand what's not working because you want to make sure you're turning it off. And not to wait till, you don't want to go 3 months down the road and take a look at your analytics and all of a sudden oh my God, that wasn't working at all. And you've spent all this money for no reason. We look at our clients' results every single week and we're making them meet with us and talking through like, that ad set's not working well, let's turn that off. This one's performing well, let's create another one that's similar to that. So really staying on top of the campaign and monitoring it as it goes, and again, whether it be yourself or someone that you partner with that can really hone in on those analytics is super important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, from a journalism perspective, I think there's a couple of things. I think that there's a misconception that you need like a publicist or someone to get your voice out there. And no shade on the publicists, you know, they're integral to what I do and they do an amazing job. But there are ways that you can engage either with the publicist or with the journalists themselves for a pretty low cost, right? The publicists are really great because they will develop relationships on your behalf, and they're on it, and they will help you be targeted and focused. But I encourage people to really work with them and or reach out on your own too. Like, what the publicist can do is like supercharge what you're trying to do. But if you can't afford an agency just yet, like, just cultivate those relationships. I think that's really important. I mean, yesterday when I got here, I just wanted to know who had the great weed. And I went to some of the locals, right, to find out, because no publicist had hit me up beforehand, and I didn't know anybody who was going to be represented here. So I was like, well, I have to find out for myself, right? So just know that there's multiple ways to go about it. And I also think there's a misconception about sponsored content, paid content, that is going to be a straight advertisement, right? But the truth is that you're putting yourself top of mind with writers that could eventually turn into organic media, like I said earlier. So I always encourage people to maybe tread the waters and try out some sponsored content advertorials, because you're going to get your foot in the door with these publications, and I think that's really important. I want to go back to what you were talking about, Robin, about kind of measuring the success of your campaigns, and I think that's something that's really, really important, right? Like, understanding how your performance is. How can you measure, in addition to just looking at the numbers? Can you get a little bit more granular about that? How do you know if a campaign's working?
Well, again, Google Analytics, you want to have that. You want to have access to, we have dashboards that allow people to take a good look at their campaign. We're connected on the back end with everyone's CRM information, so we can actually tell you your return on ad spend based on how many people have seen the ad, how many people have come in, how many people have actually purchased. So all those things, it's all about data, and it's very scientific, and it's not like the old days where we were reading ads in the paper trying to figure out if anyone was coming in or not. You're going to know if people are reacting to the messages that you're putting out there. So I think it's just really important to have the right partners and knowing what you're looking for when you're looking through the analytics.
So then, yeah, I'm just curious, like, though, you know, what is a measure of success, right? Like, and what should you be expecting?
So I think that's a great question on there. So again, when we start working into a partnership with any brand or operator, we ask them, like, what does success look like to you, right? Like, that's first and foremost, right? Like, we can tell you, benchmarks and things like that, but we want to understand, like, what the client is looking for, what the partner is looking for on that. Because again, if it is, to be seen, right, and to have that top of mind, tip of tongue awareness or market share presence, right, what we're going to recommend as far as services is going to look very differently, and how we measure those campaigns are going to look differently on that. If it's straight up kind of like what Ron was talking about, like, hey, I just want people coming to my website, coming through my doors, and I want to see my transactions go up every day, my AOV go up on that, right? That's a very different aesthetic, right? Very different thing that we're going to be measuring on that side. And the truth of the matter is, here's the truth. Like, you should be doing both, right? You should be looking at capturing as much market share first and then wallet share secondly, right? On that, because again, they need to understand before they consume on that. And again, there's other things that you can be mindful of, right? There's plenty of tools. We can be card counters at the blackjack table. We can come in, there's a thing called Google Trends out there. If you guys haven't ever looked that up, look it up. You can search by what people in any market are searching for. Is there vernacular, weed? Is it marijuana? Is it cannabis? Right? Like, understanding, like, how they're coming to find you.
Legalization is the number one search word in that space, isn't it? That's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, it is. It is on there. Legalization's on there. Another really key term that, again, people are looking for, right? Number one thing is best, followed by near me. So, like, when you do search, like, best dispensary near me, right? Like, to have ownership and understand that, like, think about it, anytime you start searching anything in Google, what does it add on? Near me, right? On that. So to have that hyper-local focus on that, and to own your local space. So again, to get to your point, like, there are all of these metrics that you can come into, and that's why there has to be clear communication with inside your team, with your external vendors and partners there, that everybody's on the same page. I cannot tell you, like, and this is the big issue, that why MSOs are struggling, is because they have too many employees and not too many people like coming over top and looking at this on the right side of things. So again, make sure your team's aligned, make sure your extended teams are aligned on there and that we're all going in the right direction. And make sure you got a good skipper that knows like, we're gonna go hit that iceberg if we don't correct course.
Definitely. Now, speaking of legalization, there's a lot of talk right now about reform, possible rescheduling to Schedule 3. How can operators prepare for that, especially on the marketing side?
So that's a great question there. So think about this. We go to this new world where we get, rescheduled and we're Class 3. What does that eliminate, right? 280E. So all of a sudden marketing and advertising becomes something you can write off for your business on that. So it expands, right, what you can do in the space. Like all of a sudden you'll have more money. Again, you'll have more margin on your products on that. But like, you got to understand too that like media is going to be more involved. Like there's going to be more coverage. Think about how many news outlets picked up the rescheduling news, right? And have done follow-up stories. And we're not talking Greenstate. We're not talking, High Times. We're not talking these periodicals that are in the industry. We're talking major Forbes, USA Today, CNN, like they all are running stories on that. So it's going to be more top of mind awareness for the consumer, for net new customers. So think about that, right? Going back to building your story, right? Owning that story. This becomes a place where you need to build that and have that because you're going to get a new wave of customers. We know like the data we've done with our partners like New Frontier, Canna Spyglass Headset, the total actionable market, right? The TAM for cannabis is about 160 million to 170 million Americans, right? Anybody guess where we're at as far as who's walked into a dispensary and bought weed legal? 60 million, right? As of today, 60 million. So you think about that's almost triple what the actionable market is. And why we're not getting those people is because we're not advertising to them for one, and we're not marketing to them properly, like what Robin said earlier. How we're going to talk to Robin is going to be very different talking to me, which is going to be very different talking to Rachelle, on what our needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. Do you have anything you want to add, Robin?
I don't think so. I was going to jump backwards 1 second
Yeah.
and say, because you said something really interesting, Jason, about like knowing what your KPI is, and so that you can measure success of an advertising campaign. That's super important because you would be surprised the number of people that we meet with, and we ask them like, what's your goal? What are you hoping to get out of this? And they don't really know how to answer the question. So that's a great starting point, is understanding like, what are you trying to get out of the advertising and marketing, and what story are you trying to tell, and what does a measure of success look like? Is it more people in the store, the cash register ringing? Is it education? Like, what does that look like? Because you can't really start the beginning foundations of your campaigns without knowing what the end result that you're hoping to get is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious if there are any questions from the audience right now about anything that we're talking about.
I have a question.
Okay.
Let me bring you this so that everybody.
Oh, great. We have a
You're
mic.
not going to need a microphone.
Okay.
I know how to use my voice properly. So the existing consumer demographic, is it 18 to 34? Or is it 21 to 35? Is that what exists now?
I think it varies by consumer group.
Nationally, it is millennial males. That is the number one person that's buying and consuming.
Okay, so if you have an audience that delivers the 35 to 64 male, or the 50 plus cannabis, where you're educating them on how to use the product properly, how would you change your content to reach two different demographic groups?
So I can speak on, at least from my perspective. It really comes down to like the story itself, right? Like, who is this content for? And at Greenstate, we try really hard to be accessible for everybody. We know who our readers are, but we also know who we are trying to reach. And what we have to do a lot is kind of get out of the bubble in our own minds. Like, we do a lot of jargon checks, right? Like, oh, is this like an inside baseball term? Like, is someone going to understand what head means, right? When I'm talking about like the community, right? Like, so it's like there's so much that we have to tackle ourselves to make sure that people understand what we're talking about and that they are not overwhelmed by the content. Now, that's not to say that we don't have content for the heady community. On 7/10 last year, I wrote this whole ode to hot knives, right? And a lot of people really enjoyed that, but then I know certain people at the company were like, this photo disturbs me. So we get that, and it's also where we distribute it too, because not only are we putting it out on our platform, but we're also putting it on Reddit. And so like, what subreddits are we posting in, right?
How important is Reddit?
Very. I mean, honestly, like we weren't doing a lot of work on there, but we started to realize that these subreddits are very loyal and active. Like the engagement is really, really good. And so there was one week where we had a couple of stories go viral on Reddit, and that was 11% of our users that week, just from posting in a subreddit. We posted a story about gelato. Our staff writer, Kara, interviewed Mario Sherbinski about gelato and about the imposters out there. And it was like the #2 story on trees, which that subreddit has like, I think 1.2 million followers. And the engagement was incredible. And I know Beard Bros shared it, and you have had quite a lot of engagement on that story as well. So it's just really interesting to see, where are you putting the content and where is your audience? Because it's not just people coming to your website or your Instagram. You have to meet people where they're at. And I say that all the time, whether it's the kind of curious grandma or the heady hash smoker, right? So.
And to go back on that with telling your story and your branding, right? So you think about, and this is something that I haven't seen really anybody in the industry do great yet, is when we think about brand impact statement, right? Your North Star. So think about Nike, right? What's Nike's brand impact statement, right? It's just do it, right? You knew it right away, came right off tongues, right?
I better know that.
Yeah, right? But think about that. So what is just do it? It's very broad terminology, but if, you can easily apply that to the mall walker, right? That just wants comfortable shoes so they can stay healthy and walk. You can take that to the aspiring athlete, that's a baseball, player, the mitts, the bats, the Under Armour, type, equipment. So that would be something that I would really challenge. I try and challenge our partners currently with that, like, what is that statement to you? Like, really, what is it that you want to be? Because if you have that North Star, then when we come in and we talk to that older demographic, right? And we're talking about that. Well, no, you had asked about the 35 to 60 on that, but like that group there, right? You still have that North Star, that brand impact, but everything's like made to them. So again, when they come to your website, they come to your stores, they come to that, they don't feel like they got bait and switch, right? And the same thing with, those of us that have been 20-year plus consumers, started in the legacy market, right? When we get hit with that, we want that same look and feel. We want to know that that's that. But like, again, you can talk more jargon. You can be more straight. Like, I'm looking for an eighth, right? And I'm looking for this experience, right? Boom. And I'm looking for efficiency of my purchasing on that, right? So again, it's just having that umbrella factor, that roof that you guys can put everything under.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I love the is it Peace by the Gram, right? That's amazing. It's stuff like that will stick in people's heads and let them know exactly what your brand is all about. So yeah, definitely really important.
Can you review what that is? Because some people not sure.
Peace by the gram.
What is it?
Peace by the gram.
Peace by the gram. How do you spell peace? With P-E-A-C-E or just a piece?
P-E-A-C-E.
And look at his T-shirt. Look at the logo, right? Like,
I love that. Oh, no, I really like that.
yeah, that's a great example of doing it right.
New?
We're just about to really get going. We've been around for a few years, but it's probably why I walk around with these guys. So we're about to really
Please
get
send me a
going.
press release. Okay. Or email or text, whatever you got.
Are there any more questions in the audience? Just curious? No? Okay, cool. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I would love to hear how people can be in touch with you. Any last words on the digital marketing scene in cannabis? Let's hear it.
Yeah, so anybody that's attending, you guys can come up to us. We've got an easy QR code that you can get all of our information and be in touch with us that way. And just, like I said, I've been working this in 2015. I have seen monumental shifts, in people willing to have conversations, big companies, right? Because again, what we really tried to do at Hearst is have conversations with our partners at Twitter, at Meta, at Google, at these places, because again, it's the normalization of like how people shop. Like, I know I'm not a big social media guy. I'm not a big fan of like digital marketing, even though I've helped build some of this stuff on there, because it's a little creepy, like what can happen on there and how they can reach out to you. But I'm excited because, again, these new doors are being opened and people are understanding, and that's just it. It's about understanding. When we spoke with Amazon late last year to be able to get on their network for video advertising and radio advertising, I'm like, okay, guys, this is an industry before the end of this decade is probably going to be $100 billion in revenue annually. And they're spending less than 1% on advertising and marketing. I'm like, and the reason why is all these channels are being shut down to them and they don't understand what they can do compliantly. So do you want to wait, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years when we go federally legal? Hopefully it's sooner than that, right? To get on the gravy train where it's passed you by. Or do you want to be on the second or third floor with the industry and be helping them on there? Because at the end of the day, like, again, my story comes from medical on that. My mom died of cancer. There was no legal programs yet, but there were medical trials. And thank God my mom was put on a trial at the turn of the century. It didn't save her life, but it gave her respite. But it saved my life. I was a collegiate athlete. I lost my scholarship because I got injured, career-ending injury. And then, 2 years later, your mom's dying, right? She's got 6 months to live. And I had never used cannabis until I used it with my mom. And it saved my life because it gave me all the opioids and all the other stuff that they were giving me for pain, the mental health that I was going through with, I thought I was going to be in the NHL, quite frankly. And then my mom's dying on that, and I'm 20. That's a lot for anybody to take in at any age. And the plant saved my life because it gave me respite and continues to give me respite. And so it's always been my passion project to bring big media more into cannabis to tell that story. And I'm so excited that Amazon and Meta and these companies, Apple, I spent 10 years with Apple, and finally Apple Plus, you can see before you watch Dark Matter, Ted Lasso, an advertisement for a brand or dispensary now. That's crazy to think that's coming now. So again, I think it's an exciting time on there to really think about your brand and what you can do with it.
What about you, Robin? How can people, aside from just come up to you, maybe if they're not able to before the show's over?
Yeah, so obviously we have a website for CannStudio, so you can hit that up. It's sort of a project under construction still, I'll say that.
But it's going to be in the studio. There's a lot of definitions of studio.
So for Hearst, we have several different studios that we... Okay, yeah, so we have Story Studio, that's our native advertising. CannStudio is obviously, it's advertising, yeah. So CannStudio is just our version. It's a full-service ad agency for just the cannabis vertical. So that's what we do, and we would love to talk to any one of you. And super proud of Hearst, and really want to acknowledge that they're one of the first media companies to actually take this on.
The first words I said to Mike DeLuca were, you have an incredible opportunity as the Hearst Corporation to undo what Randolph started.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm very
no, it's true.
But I did say that to my first
It's 100% true. And you think about where we started in that narrative. And again, it wasn't necessarily about putting the industry down, right? It was a business decision.
Respecting the
Yeah. But again, he owned timber rights and wanted newspapers to be printed on paper and not on hemp, right? And so I think about that's where the narrative started, and he used, let's face it, underhanded tactics. We know what big families did back in the day that owned these companies, right?
Their own, like Harry Anslinger.
Exactly, right? But that's why it's a good thing now, right? To come full circle and be atoning for that. None of us were alive during that time, right? So we can reshape and start a new narrative.
Yeah, and honestly, it's something that I wrestled with quite a bit, to be honest, when I took this job. But what I realized was that I could reach a bigger audience, a more mainstream audience, and tell the truth about this plant, I was very concerned, and I still am, frankly, about the mainstream narrative around cannabis. I do believe that we are in Reefer Madness 2.0. Every day you see a headline, middle school kids sickened by gummies, cannabis causes psychosis, right? It's the same messaging that we were hearing 100 years ago. But now we have an opportunity to set the record straight, and I think that's really, really important and very forward-thinking of Hearst, And so it's really cool to be able to lead that charge and have them believe in someone who came from the culture who wants to get it right for real this time. And I think it's awesome. And so I'm really, really proud, actually, to be part of this. And I appreciate those people who encourage me to do it. Some of them are sitting right over here.
Fan club. Fan club with Rachelle. I like that.
So and in terms of how to get in touch, I would definitely encourage you, if you have a story to tell, to reach out to me. You can reach out to editor@greenstate.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. My DMs are always open. I'm always interested in hearing about people who have a story, especially people with pure hearts who are in this space with a passion for the plant, as I think we all are. So anyways, thanks so much for coming, you guys. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks to Flower Expo for having us. Thank you to Kai over here. Appreciate you so much.